Today is Father's Day. This is the day when every loving child is going to make a post about their father. Hey Dad, thanks for being there when it mattered. Thanks for teaching me how to throw a ball, or thanks for teaching me how to stick with it when it's hard. Thanks for coming to my games, my dance recitals. Or maybe you're that one kid who's thinking on this day, man, I wish my dad wasn't a self-centered, immature, drunken scumbag named Morgan Wallen. Regardless, typically I'm on that train to just brag about my dad. I don't want to do that. Today I want to do something different. I want to tell you about the greatest dad I've ever met and what his example meant to me, watching his relationships, watching who he was as a father, as a husband, and just as a man in general, the effect that he had on his son who was about my age. This guy was just a normal blue-collar dude, kind of quiet, not really shy, but didn't go out of his way to draw attention to himself. Pretty funny, very good-natured, friendly dude, but just not a showboater, not about himself at all. And he was the highest skilled guy I've ever met. Like, the array of skills this man had, he collected them like some people collect stamps or My Little Ponies or something. A collection of skills like you would not believe. And because of that, he was usually the most valuable guy on any job site. Just because if there was something that needed to get done, he could do it. And the things that he didn't think he was very good at, I watched other guys who did those things for a living come to him for advice and even ask him to come help out on their jobs on his days off. And he would usually do it. He had a servant's heart. That was just the kind of guy he was. And I watched his son learn from that. This guy, because he was such a hard worker, he was dedicated to whatever he did. He worked for like 8 different companies doing 5 very different jobs over the course of his son's childhood. Almost every time leveling up because an employer would hear about him and would pursue him, trying to get him to come to work for them because they wanted his skills, they wanted his mindset, they wanted his work ethic, his tenacity, and his value. Because he was dedicated, he was disciplined, and he had integrity. To the point where he's the only guy I've ever known who was ever fired for overachieving. He signed on with this one company to do something that was kind of a small niche in the company, but it needed to be done, and they hired him to do the job. And he did that job so well that he actually grew that part of the business to the point where it became a substantial part of that company overall. It had a great reputation. Everybody wanted to work with them, and because of this, a couple of the higher-ups in this company didn't like the attention he was getting from the owner, didn't like the fact that he was getting so much credit, and they really didn't like the fact that he made them look less so. He made them look lazy, and because of that, they had him fired. And I watched the way that this affected this man's son, learning at a very young age. He watched his dad be punished for doing his best, for doing the right thing, for being an achiever. And that's one of the hardest lessons I think a lot of people fail to learn or just don't want to. Because doing the right thing, doing your best to be the best, and do it with honor and integrity, it will get you loved by a few, but it will get you hated by most. But that doesn't make it any less the right thing. A lot of times doing the right thing will cost something. And in this case, it cost the guy his job. But here again, I watched as this family weathered through that, and the guy picked himself up, and in a seemingly short amount of time, he found a better job. A place that actually prized his skills and wanted that portion of their company to grow. And so they hired him. And I watched over the years as this guy with his son, they very rarely did any leisure activity. He taught his son how to throw a ball a bit, and they played backyard basketball, baseball, but sports weren't a big deal to them. In fact, I very rarely even heard them talk about sports. But they would take on these big projects: landscaping, home renovation, head gaskets, transmissions, carburetors. They would do these projects together, and through that I watched them grow closer. It's just insane how close these two. All the while in all these things, this guy wasn't really a verbal teacher. He was an example. He didn't really think of himself that highly. He just showed you. And so all these things that kid was learning from this guy who was humble. That's the biggest takeaway I took from everything, how humble he was. He was just very down to earth. Very rarely ever saw any level of pride or ego. In fact, any level of pride typically rubbed him the wrong way. And that's had a big effect on me too. I don't deal well with proud people because this guy's example, getting more done and not having to brag on himself ever. And so this guy's son grew up watching this example firsthand, really close, and teaching him these qualities, these traits of honor, integrity, discipline, commitment, loyalty. And I don't think these traits are any better exemplified than in the way that this guy treated his wife. This was something special. When I tell you that he only had eyes for her, this is how extreme this was. Every now and then we would watch a movie together, and this one time movie, a girl comes on screen in a bikini, and I watched this guy's head just snap directly, staring right at his wife to the point where he couldn't even see the screen. And he just stared at her with this loving gaze until that scene was over. This guy would not give one moment of lust to another woman. This guy's wife had no reason to ever doubt his loyalty. He lived for her. He would crush any thought, any potential for any scenario in which he could ever cheat on her. And I watched the way that his son learned from that how to treat women and his views on relationships. And I watched as this son grew older, the lessons that he learned from this man, the lessons that we all learned. The guy would not quit. This guy would give 100% to everything. It didn't matter as a father, as a husband, as an employee. This guy just gave 100%. And the kind of guy you'd follow anywhere to do anything. The kind of guy you want as a neighbor, the kind of guy you want as a friend. One of the biggest things that really stood out to me was when he had a really severe accident, messed him up pretty bad. They didn't know how bad he was messed up for months, and he still kept going to work, physically broken, doing a very physically demanding job that most men in good health struggle doing. And he went out and he did it. He didn't complain. And then I watched as his son grew older and they started a business together, and they grew that business to a thriving level, going from a father teaching his son to partners and equals. A very, very rare and special kind of relationship. And so, yeah, every kid wants to think that my dad's the greatest. Every kid wants to believe that their dad is just the manliest of men. But believe me when I tell you that I have yet to meet a man who could hold a candle to this guy in any degree. And it just so happens that that father is mine. So when I tell you that my dad is better than yours, it's not a brag. It's just a fact. And I'm not saying any of this just to trump up my dad or make him the grandest example like any kid would want their dad to be. My dad has inspired me to be a better man. An insanely high bar to live up to, and I don't think that I do. But I strive for that. And I want to inspire a whole new generation of men to attain to that level of character as well. So here's to that hopeful next generation. Happy Father's Day.